Well, I'd like to thank everybody from the panelists. Maybe just a fast introductions from everybody. I think everybody knows, but Dominique, starting with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dominique Gagnon. I work for Bell Canada. I'm responsible for our product development within the Bell business market in Canada.
Hello, everyone. Frank Morales, working for Orange Business as the VP Evolution Platform.
My name is Frederick Choi. I'm based in Hong Kong. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of PCCW Global.
Hi, I'm Bob Victor. I'm based in Philadelphia, and I head product and customer solutions at Comcast Business.
Good afternoon. I'm Deepika Bhattacharya. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Verizon Business. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you all panelists. And, you know, it's great to have such a great set of panelists that have such great ownership of your businesses. So that's really good. So what we'll do is we'll keep this really informal, and it'd be really more of a discussion. We can, like, you know, like, what's it called? Meet the press or something? I can't remember. It's called Crossfire. Crossfire, there we go, do a crossfire, okay. So I'll just start it off, and then maybe we'll just kind of evolve it. And I like to do that, because I think it'll be much more iterative, and I think people will find it really nice. So I think the most important thing is, I talked about NaaS, but maybe you could get perspective. What is NaaS in your mind, and why is NaaS important? Or maybe it's not even important. Like, I'd love to hear. And just, why don't you start with Deepika, and we'll just go down, and you guys just fire away.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so the way I look at NaaS is really being able to procure and use network services differently than we've ever done before. Now at Verizon, we launched our version of NaaS. It was during COVID, and that it wasn't that it was intentional, but the timing was right, only because during COVID, we had enterprises who needed to change their traffic patterns completely, right? So they needed a service that was elastic, they needed a service that was dynamic, they didn't want to pay for services that they were not using, all the things, Pascal, that you covered. So while the technology existed, I think it was a mindset on the enterprise side that they needed to use networking services differently from what they had done before. So that's what we think of NaaS as, the ability to consume in a different way, like you consume cloud services. You have the elasticity, you have the automation, you have all the pieces that the enterprise doesn't have to build it all themselves and own all the hardware and do all the hard work. The service provider does it for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. I think the alternative, as you started to allude to, is network as a self-service, and that's enterprises basically putting the pieces together by themselves, you know, whether it's underlay from multiple providers, whether it's security from individual and usually multiple service providers, whether it's the networking piece, thinking about the wireless LAN. And in this environment, it's an exciting time to be here because it's so dynamic. I mean, even the underlay is really changing as we move from, you know, as you said, Pascal, from Ethernet to more just internet access and new wireless technologies. Security is changing incredibly quickly. And so it's an opportunity for us as service providers, as an industry, to get together and say, how do we kind of do these things more efficiently, put these technologies together, help customers through a journey so that they, you know, ultimately can focus on their businesses and procure network services from service providers more efficiently.
Because I'm responsible from a revenue perspective, so I probably look at it from a customer perspective. When we talk, there's many benefits of NaaS. I'm sure all of you know about it. And the point I want to touch on is particularly during the COVID, our enterprise customer probably will think, shall we still continue to invest in the previous model versus what other mechanisms we should use? I think NaaS can provide a very different approach, i.e. instead of a very CapEx investment model into an OpEx model, i.e. pay as you use or the subscription base. I think this model particularly important during the COVID time where many of our customers are revisiting what kind of like model shall we move forward in order to cater for the customer's requirement.
What to say after all that? I would say simplification. I think this word is becoming more and more complex for all companies. And I would like to return what Deepika said. And for me, NaaS is all about a cloud experience while consuming all our services. So it can be done in such different ways. Because of course, everyone is moving to that. Vendors are moving to NaaS, service provider, we are moving to NaaS. And at the end of the day, it's what, as an industry, we can make to simplify all this, to make sure that a given customer, and especially a B2B customer or service provider buying to a wholesale company, will have the ability to consume whatever you want and can change also the service he's buying to another one. So it looks like very complex today, but we are building that within Orange Business in a different way. We are building that with our partners to facilitate the consumption of NaaS from our partners. And we are making that also by hosting these partners inside our backbone, because you can see NaaS as I'm able to consume SD-WAN like a cloud, I'm able to consume security like a cloud, I'm able to consume cloud connectivity, but you can also think about how could I make NaaS as a workload transmission from user to applications. And then it becomes a bit more complex additionally, but it's where we need to go. And I do subscribe to the OpEx model, changing to CapEx model, because also it changes and it addresses the scarcity in terms of skills that you need to have within companies to have all the ability to move forward on this technology movement.
Well, it's difficult to follow after everyone has explained what it is, but to me, it's about a change in conversation. We need to change the conversation with the enterprise from a technology conversation to an outcome. And at the end of the day, when we can have that difference, that's when we start simplifying the conversation like Frank is talking about. If I look at back in 20 years ago, NaaS is to server. What happened when the virtualization of the server environment started happening. And that's where we need to move if we want to be able to implement a true as a service model, is to have that change and change of mentality as well, because it means we need to work together as co-petition, if you wish, in the environment and the community, to be able to provide to the enterprise that seamless experience.
So any other discussion? So I've got a trick question. Nat told me to put a trick question in here. Okay, let's blame Nat. Okay, so what's the difference when managed network, they come to your managed network, versus NaaS? Can anybody explain? Like, I would think managed network means that you've done it for they bought the equipment and you're managing for them. Just like I put up in my home my own, wells and my own electricity grids and everything. I get maintenance guys and come and maintenance for me, versus I buy from the utilities. Is that kind of how you guys think it? We don't have to go up down the line, but go ahead, please. Yeah. Yeah,
I can start. I think you're right. A managed service is still sort of static, but it's just that the service provider has eyes on it, right? And they may be proactive in terms, but then the architecture is pretty static. The way I look at NaaS is, it really is no, you'll always get the best technology focused on the outcome, right? So it's much more dynamic than just having somebody manage an environment that you've procured in a certain way.
Okay, so like you procured it and now someone kind of manages and operates it for me, but they don't upgrade or nothing unless I pay for it.
Yeah, there might be, based on the way you've set up the contract, they may build in some upgrades, but in terms of changing the architecture, changing the technology, you may be using a wired technology today, but tomorrow, if it's a wireless technology that's fit for purpose, NaaS will include that. Whereas in managed services, it's a little harder to make a technology change.
Oh, good. Okay. Did you pass the trick question now?
Actually, Pascal answered the question first. Did he get it okay?
No, I was giving a hint.
One of the questions I'd have actually on this is, typically really large enterprises tend to kind of come to us and say, look, we've picked all of our technology vendors. We want this. We want your help managing it. Whereas in the mid-market and sort of down a little bit to smaller customers are more likely to say, look, I don't know what the best technology is. You guys kind of decide that and service it for us. And so I think one of the interesting questions about NaaS will be, where does it settle? Is it, more prevalent in the kind of upper large enterprise? Is it more of a mid-market kind of concept, or does it cut across? And I don't think, well, I don't know the answer to that question yet. I'd be interested to.
Well, actually, that's a good question. It's part of the question we have. Is it a mid-market? Will the multinationals buy it, or will they say, we just want best of breed? Or anybody want to answer some of this? It'd be really good.
I think the NaaS from a potential customer perspective definitely go beyond the SME. It can be used by the global enterprise, really big corporations. For example, I think one of the benefits NaaS can provide is the global connectivities, right? Where the multi-cloud on-ramps are connected to public cloud, and in which the regions that they are closest to, they are customers that are nearest to it. So by doing that, that means from a customer's performance perspective, the efficiency is improved, from a redundancy perspective, is shorter. So definitely is suitable for the multinational corporations as well.
Yeah, and I think that based to your question, manage and compared to NaaS and the type of market we can address, I think it's really just like being in a 3-star Michelin restaurant and asking what you want. So maybe some MNC will go to 2 starters because we just want that, and they have the ability because they have skills inside to do a lot of things. And maybe an SMB customer will go to starter, main, and dessert because it just wants the outcomes, as you were saying. So I think we can definitely. I don't like to oppose or to compare NaaS to managed services, because within NaaS you can do a lot of managed services, and I think the more you go to SMB, the more you can provide managed services, and the more you go to MNCs, the more you go to a la carte. And compared to, I would say, legacy managed services, you can be much more open, much more wider open in terms of vendor choices, in terms of capability to provide services compared to, let's say, legacy services in terms of manage.
I'd like to go back to the the second question, or the previous question that you said about the difference between
open discussion,
managed services and as a service. To me, a managed service, typically, you're going to look at the definition of the service, and then you measure it with SLAs and whether how good you are in delivering what's on paper. When you move as a service, that's where you start changing the conversation to the outcome base. So when you start doing this, who's going to be the easier to sell your that to, the lower market or the higher market? Well, you go sell it to the bank, and they're going to tell you how they want it, and they're going to want to measure you on SLAs. And when you go down market, I think the adoption is going to be easier because they're going to be happy to provide and manage we manage the outcome for them. And I think with time, it's going to start. My opinion, it's going to be easier adoption moving down market than it's going to be up market. But the benefit, the larger enterprise will have the larger benefit.
Okay, so another trick question came from over there. No, we gotta make it exciting. So we gotta have trick questions. They're not trick; they're just different questions, not planned. So let's talk about how does the hyperscaler will play with this NaaS, because you saw the announcement from Microsoft Azure on SSE. They got virtual WAN, you got virtual hub, a WAN hub from AWS. So they're also becoming NaaS. And how will all of this play together? I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure the audience would love to hear your thoughts too. Of course, don't share anything that's very confidential, but.
If I can start, I would say that I don't know up to which extent we are defining NaaS, but NaaS could be seen as a very important or main business into a platform business. And of course, in that way, any vendors, whether it is Palo Alto, Cisco, Fortinet, Cato Network, whoever, or a hyperscaler, are playing their role. They are providing this service. And I saw the last announcement of Microsoft. I hope that they will not do the same on SSE that they are doing on XDR, but let's see. but globally, they are providing a platform service. And what we can add as an industry is, first of all, to manage also the endpoint, whether it is the users or the site. And we have all, because for me, NaaS is also as an outcomes-driven type of capabilities of solution, is to manage the workload, to manage the outcomes with the connectivity. Who is able to provide connectivity at site or for end users? Is to manage connectivity plus security, connectivity plus maybe voice, plus security, plus cloud connectivity. So you have a lot to orchestrate across NaaS solution from lots of vendors. And I don't see yet too many customers with the idea to provide all their services, whether it is security, cloud connectivity, voice, whatever, to the same vendors. So the best of breed is also a part of this global orchestration capability. So it's like any marketing guy, I always have two options: keep calm and be paranoid.
Yeah, from a telco perspective, you could see that as a big threat, right? So essentially the hyperscalers are coming down, they're going to take over everything, and they're coming in from the higher value, and from a telco, you're the lower value. We're trying to come up, they're trying to go down. The reality is, I agree with you, is there needs to be convergence, but none of them are going to be able to do it all. And I think it's going to be an ecosystem. And that's where MEF plays an important role, is to bring that ecosystem with standards and that we can work more efficiently together. That's, I think, the key for the future.
Yeah, I think on the service provider side, and I agree with what was said so far, but on the service provider side, one of the things that, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, is that it's an asset-heavy business.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other providers who want to step into it, but you have to really understand that, are they really ready for an asset-heavy business, right? So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be partnerships where you really take the best of either side. The hyperscalers brought ease of use, a different business model, a disruptive business model. I think the service providers would benefit from some of that. But then I think just in terms of being able to provide the critical network connectivity, which is non-trivial, and especially now after COVID, the network is so critical, more than it's ever been before. It's something that we have to continue to invest in. And I haven't really seen them. They've dipped their toes into it, but then to really invest in the way you need to provide that kind of reliable, secure networking capabilities, that's a tall order. So I think there's going to be partnerships more than one, like the hyperscalers completely dominating the service providers or vice versa.
I mean, I think it's a great question, actually. I think the last question, too, these trick questions are really good. I mean,
Grading your question.
Yeah. This is kind of a tough one, because telco is a asset-heavy business, but so is the hotel industry, and Airbnb kind of did pretty well. And so the question is, can some of the hyperscalers kind of abstract out the asset-heavy part of the business? As I think about overlay, can they effectively commoditize underlay? And as underlay gets more simple, more internet, and even actually as we help interconnect different underlays, that may create an opportunity for overlay providers to deliver network as a service in an asset-light model for them, at least. On the other hand, no one wants to. I mean, Microsoft, of all the companies, is in the best position with Teams, obviously with Windows, with Active Directory. They want to do identity. They're getting into security. So they are in a privileged position. On the other hand, most enterprises would say, look, we want to be multi-cloud. We don't want to rely on one vendor. We do think, for the foreseeable future, we're going to be, there's just such a variety and a proliferation of, endpoints and technologies that we wouldn't want to kind of put all of our eggs in, in one basket. So I think it'll be really interesting over the next several years to see how this plays out. I don't know exactly how it will go. If I were Microsoft, I would probably try to be a Airbnb of network as a service, but we'll see.
Anybody else?
Just want to add on what Dominic said. I mean, from the hyperscaler, they are coming from the applications down to what's the layer one connectivity. Whereas from a telco perspective, it's the reverse, right? So the questions I think also are being addressed by the panel speakers is, where is the midpoint? Where can we find a common ground? I think to us, the most important part is the seamless integration. Integration from a telco or from a NaaS to the hyperscaler, I think, to multi-clouds. So, and that therefore bring up the questions, what role MEF can play, which is therefore the LSO, API, et cetera, probably is also a very, very important role for us to integrate the two worlds.
Does someone have a question? Is that what you're saying, John? Oh, come on, yeah, ask a question.
I have a question. You talked a lot about the definition of what you want to subject, but you haven't really addressed the fact that your BSS OSS to network has not changed in over 30 years. And now you're talking about partnering with, you know, the cloud providers and so on. And without changing any of that infrastructure layer, which is really closely tied together with all of these different spaghetti APIs everywhere and so on, how is that going to work with the new NaaS, right? This is what the TM Forum is trying to address, is actually really creating a separation of concern, removing all the knowledge of how you do things from the BSS layer, so that you're now decoupling and you become more agile in doing these things with partnership and so on. But we haven't talked about, you know, nobody is addressing the big elephant, because the time that it takes you to create a product is really because of your back office. And it's time to change your TMN layer, that is product to service to resources, where you know everything in all of your BSS products in every one of your layers.
That's a good question. It's because we are not saying that we have hired a lot of new chefs inside the kitchen to make that happen. So we are not speaking too much about that, but in our case, we have a completely, or we are close to have completely decoupled the network and the services, and we can do, we have automated, I think, something like 75% of changes inside the network, and for services, we are doing that, of course, in a progressive way compared to the, let's say, use cases of the NaaS. But we are moving forward into that direction. And if I go back to what MEF is able to provide, or could provide, is we are just hosting cloud-based services from vendors. And it's where we need to, because we are doing that with Fortinet today, we are doing that with Netscope, we have over discussion with others. I think with Console Connect, you have some over development and that. And each time it's a new story. Each time it's a new story. It's where I think in order to make that happen, we need to have some standardized use case, payload, and so on, in order to make sure that each time we want to integrate with the new vendors, with a new service, we can make it easily, not to reinvent the wheel each time we have someone new to integrate. But we are doing that, but we are not speaking too much. It's not so sexy, but we are doing it.
Yeah, no, it's a real problem, obviously, and one of the things that we're starting to look at is, can we, like, we've got to think differently, right? So with some of our newer services, we're actually making conscious decisions to not use our BSS system. It causes a lot of heartburn, it causes a lot of, you know, concern, and can we get everything right? But the question is, if we think differently about these services, you know, like our DNA might be like, we've got to do it this way, right? But it's not. We're starting to look at off-the-shelf systems, newer systems, a different commercial model, a different way to provide that service, when actually trying to cut the cord from some of our older BSS, because otherwise it would take us 5 years to come out with the launch, and that's just not going to fly.
Yeah, maybe to double down on Deepika's point, absolutely, it's a great point. And, you know, at Comcast Business, I'm sure a lot of our peer companies, when they think of, well, what does the product team do? You know, there's a perception, well, they must be kind of working with engineers in a dark corner, coming up with new security products, when really what we do is we, look for vendors that have good products and spend a lot of time figuring out how just to, package and sell those products to our customers. And if even moving away from the BSS and OSS systems, there's just legacy ways that we do business, which is, what's the audit trail? What are we selling customers? What equipment sits at the customer? Who owns that? What if the customer wants a change? How do we change the service order? And, you got to figure out, how does that business relationship work, before you think about how do you automate it? And I think this, this whole network as a service discussion raises some fundamental business relationship questions about how we, as providers deliver services to our customers. I mean, we'd like to say, well, we'll just do what's right for the customer. And, that's what you'd like to do, but there's a whole set of, ripple and second and third order impacts of doing that.
I think, Bob, I really like what you just said there. I think that's where the conversation needs to happen as well. And, when I look at, for example, the underpinning SD-WAN today, that, you need to virtualize to get to a NaaS, at the end of the day, you still need to deploy hardware to different locations. And it's still a heavy project to implement that. And that's where we need to change that business consumption model and that conversation with our clients as well, and how we can facilitate and get that more efficient. And to your point, removing the dependency to our backend system, that's a key focus for us as well.
And probably Microsoft has no interest in figuring this out, so maybe it'll be okay.
Yeah, so one example I like to use sometimes is if and it's a telecom example, but it changes the back end. So if you think about, like, those of you who've been around, as long as I have, like 20 years ago, if you made phone calls from where to where, if you're crossing this kind of line or that kind of line, is it how many minutes? Is it after 5 o'clock? Is it 11 o'clock? We had all these rules that were built, and there was all this data that was tracked, and so we could bill you exactly, for your call that lasted 3 minutes from, and then they went to like unlimited, call anytime, anywhere, you pay the same amount. All those systems that did all that tracking, no need for it anymore, right? So I think there are ways to think about these products and these newer products where we don't have to be tied to like a legacy way of doing business. And that's why, like, newer commercial models, newer pricing models, newer ways of inventorying the system will help sort of break the attachment. So if there's anybody in the room who loves their BSS systems, I don't mean to offend you, but it's, I think it's an opportunity to be creative and not necessarily just add to, the tech debt that's been incurred with BSS systems over the years.
Really, really good questions, because I think a lot of us has been in a telco for many years, right? When we're talking about changing our OSS, BSS, it's really, really I think 5 years minimum, probably 10 years or more. So instead of, if we look at the traditional telco model waiting for the OSS, BSS ready, if we look at what the software companies normally do using their agile framework, is whenever they have a product ready, they will push it. So I think we have to adjust into that way. It might not be ideal, it might not fit all the products that we are able to offer, but at least this is a shortcut to come around, rather than fixing the entire OSS, BSS. Have something ready to the market, meet the customer's requirements, and then step by steps improve from that basis.
Is there anybody else want to ask a question? Fahim, grab the mic. Good, I like this interactive.
So sorry, it might be a bit of a left field question, but I'm interested in the panel's insight on this. So traditionally, from a sales point of view, our sales forces have been incentivized based upon selling circuits, selling networks, etc. What do we need to do in order to change the incentivization structure to actually encourage, the promotion of NaaS services, so that basically our sales forces will actually go out and actually sell them?
I mean, I think one of the key things is training and learning. I mean, Comcast traditionally has served small businesses, and as we kind of sold networks, one of the things that we realized is our biggest barrier wasn't necessarily just compensation systems, was just comfort that salespeople had in front of customers talking about these types of services. And you have really successful salespeople who are used to selling circuits, and it's a totally different mindset. It's more of a software, it's more of a, relationship, a dialogue with the customer around, what are you trying to achieve? So I think that's, from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges. How do you just, educate the sales force and get them comfortable selling these types of things?
I think it goes hand in hand also with the what you're trying to sell, right? So if you look at the cellular, how a salesperson sell a cell phone, it's not about the technology, it's about, what kind of cell phone do you want and what kind of bandwidth or consumption of data plan you're looking. It's very simple to explain to someone's buying. So as we transform into network as a service and we simplify the conversation, I think it's even going to be simpler from a Salesforce perspective to have that conversation and talk about really what the customer is interested, which is connecting the user to its data and have a consumption model that makes sense to him.
I have spent the last 18 months and 5 years ago probably, or 4 years ago, speaking about SD-WAN, and each time I was explaining SD-WAN to salespeople, I say, don't sell SD-WAN. Think about the project of the customer, because if he's going to you saying, I want this SD-WAN, and very often they say, I want SD-WAN vendor A or B or C or D. Keep that conversation out and just be concentrated on this project, because behind a SD-WAN project, there is a move to cloud, there is a critical application moving to Azure or to Amazon or whatever, and there is a huge project probably behind. And this one is interesting because once you have this one, you know what is the outcomes, and you know what you can sell, not only SD-WAN, but security, plus cloud connectivity, plus blah, blah, blah. And I've made that across the last 18 months, but I do agree is something that we need to push and to repeat and to repeat and to repeat, because I think things will increase in that way, because everything is software, so you need to constantly have this discussion with customers, and it will not stop now. It will continue to progress like this.
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment. As you all know, we have defined cloud services in MEF. And that cloud services have components on the telco side and also components in the cloud side. Now, we have OSS/BSS for reasons, for good reasons, and which is really the monitoring the services and keeping track of the life cycle of services and things like that. We don't see that on the other side. So therefore, you can put all the blame on our side to say, oh, your OSS/BSS is not simple and things like that. On the other side, you have nothing. So in order to really achieve a true NaaS, both partners need to do their homework in some sense to achieve true NaaS. That is, we do simplifications on our side, but also on the cloud partners, they need to do their own side so that we can truly provide a NaaS to the industry as we would like to see. Thank you.
Do you want to answer it, or you want to ask a question?
It was a comment, right?
It's more a comment. Okay. While teeing that up, I got a question because we got about 10 minutes. Yeah. So will NaaS be as popular and as ubiquitous as what IaaS and PaaS and SaaS has done for clouds, for applications? Do you think networks will go that route and will be called, I mean, we'll just put the name of NaaS today, it's cloud, a utility. Do you think NaaS is really going to take off like IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS? Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think from a technology standpoint, I think it can, but I think to the points that we've made is that's not sufficient, right? It's the outcome, it's the ease of use. Can they make, can our customers like interact with us? Can they make changes easily and quickly? Those were, I think, the CX wrappers, all the other areas is what's going to, I think, make the difference, not just the base technology itself. So if we fail in changing the way our customers interact with us, then I think it's going to be very difficult for it to be.
Experience plus commercial model.
Correct.
I think we have big hurdles to resolve. But once we resolve and fix those hurdles, it will be very, very popular. I think it will be as popular as everything else because we're going to simplify the way our client consumes, and we are going to support the evolution of technology. So I think our challenge is to resolve those hurdles to start with.
First of all, I think we have time before NaaS will become a commodity. We have time to make it happen. Yeah. So that's the first point. Secondly, from what I've seen from customers, is today customers, they have done their transformation and now they are in the process of doing digital first business, doing business with digital. So it's no more IT supporting the business, it's digital is the business. And I think it will come to us that NaaS will be the business. And the next, for me, the next transformation is in the process of selling outcomes. One of the main outcomes for our customers is to be able to take decision based on data. And I think data will structure the infrastructure behind, and especially on the connectivity, cloud, and so on. And I think this capability that we have to manage the workload, manage the data, to bring all this data to customers to take decision is probably the next business model that we need to explore.
Very interesting. You have something?
I think customer experience is very, very important. How easy the customer can use it from a visibility perspective, from a control perspective, from a UI UX perspective, these are all very critical components for the customers to decide whether they will use our NaaS or they will use something else. So, so from our perspective, therefore, we are hiring more and more people involving in the UI UX, because from that perspective, it's a way of make the life easier from a customer perspective so that they will be very easy to use the service.
Did you want to say it?
Yeah, I was going to rebound on the three previous questions from Fahim, from Mehmet and team on, the threat of the hyperscalers. And I think we all as MEF should keep on, in mind our roots. The hyperscalers are enjoying a privilege of living in a single, very confined data centers. And we are serving customers that are spread all around the world. Our very role as MEF is actually to collaborate among ourselves, to connect those customers to the hyperscalers or others. And it's not so much of a threat to see the hyperscalers. They're actually the very reason we exist, is to help bring in connectivity to them. And they owe us that we bring traffic to them, not the other way around. And I think that's, to Fahim's question about the incentive, that's the incentive we need to keep our salespeople is we're here to connect people and do it better than anyone else. Oh, I think AT&T had that as a slogan, yeah? But that's what we do, is that we collaborate to make that happen.
So that's a very good point. I think we'll end it. I think what MEF has been trying for a long time is to connect the ecosystem together to look like one time we called it a federation of all the telcos coming together. We've done it Ethernet for the data plane, but we've not done it on the automation side, and not the experience side. So together is whether you sell into a retail customer, you have your whole ecosystem of all the providers worldwide. That's part of your journey, part of that your customer's journey. You hide that, but it's all seamless, right? And that's why we did Sonata. That's why we've been working on this ecosystem side so heavily, because we know that's really the fundamentals of putting together this federation of all the telcos worldwide to come together, right? That's
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of money to be made, right? So I think if we build the right automation, the integration, the partnership, then the size of the pie is going to grow, right? So to me, that's
Exactly.
like, I don't want to compete with the others, but I just want, as part of a larger pie, then we can all be successful regardless of, which part our strengths lie in.
Just for the record, we compete very rigorously.
We do, but yeah, we do. But on the other hand,
We partner.
there's nothing better than good competition, right? So.
And sometimes you are hard in competition, Devika.
Okay, I'm getting yanked off the stage, but I want to give a hand.
You got to do what you got to do.